What if presidential elections are really just one big personality contest? I'm going to show you that since the United States began, Americans have been voting for personality of the candidates. I'm going to teach you a system so you can assess and figure out the styles of the candidates so that the next time you're watching a presidential election, you will know exactly what you're looking at. You will have a sense of their style, and I'm going to reveal a personality bias that we have as we vote for the next president. So first, I'd like to teach you a system so that you can learn a little bit about the power of personality and learn about the styles that we're going to use. Now, I'm not going to use characteristics of the brain. I'm not going to use neurotransmitters. I'm not going to talk about brain chemistry, but I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to use 4 birds that parallel the 4 styles. Let's start off nice and easy. Let's start with the eagle. So if someone has the traits of an eagle, they are confident, they are direct, they are assertive, they take charge, they make things happen. In terms of presidents, think of someone like George W. Bush, the decider. Mission accomplished. Lyndon Baines Johnson are good examples of the eagle style. Someone who is the parrot. Parrots are fun. They are social. They are talkative. They are enthusiastic and charismatic. They have a big smile, and they always look to the positive side. Think of Ronald Reagan's shining city on a hill, or Bill Clinton has that parrot smile. Next up, we've got the dove. Now, doves are soft-spoken. They're caring, they're gentle. They care about people, and they are helpful. Think of someone like Jimmy Carter or Gerald Ford. Finally, we have the owl. Now, owls are logical, they are analytical, they are detail-oriented. They have a process and a plan and a system. Someone like George H.W. Bush is a good example, as was Eisenhower. Now, we are not just one of these bird types. We actually have a little bit of each one, but there's probably 1 or 2 that characterize who you are. And I'm going to show you that you've already learned how to use these 4 styles. So let me show you that you can figure out the people that I'm about to show. Let's start off with Kevin Hart and Ellen DeGeneres. Now, I'm going to guess most of you have probably never met them, but yet you already have a sense of their style, don't you? So in a moment, I'm going to have you call out what you think their style is. Are they the direct and assertive eagle, the charismatic and enthusiastic parrot, the soft-spoken, caring, compassionate dove, or the logical, analytical owl? Are you ready? Use your outside voice on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Parrot is exactly right. And notice the consensus, and you just learned this. Next up, we've got Mother Teresa and Princess Diana and Mr. Rogers. You ready? Eagle, parrot, dove, or owl? 1, 2, 3. Dove. Notice the consistency here. You already have learned the styles. Next, we have got Bill Gates and Emma Watson. By the way, Emma Watson played Hermione in Harry Potter, who shares the same style as Emma Watson. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Owl is right. Notice what you're doing. So we've got eagle, parrot, dove, and owl. Last up, we have the Terminator, the Governator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the greatest of all time, Simone Biles, trying things nobody would ever even attempt. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Eagle is right. Notice what you just did. You were able to figure out their styles, and you were able to figure them out fast. Now, as I went through and identified the styles of past presidents, I didn't just go off of a gut impulse in 3 seconds. I lived with the presidents. I read what they wrote, and the beautiful thing about past presidents and candidates is people not only write about what their policies are, but they write about who they are. And when you see words like gentle for Jimmy Carter, it tells me he is the dove. When you see words like electric and charismatic for John F. Kennedy, it tells me he is the parrot. I met with scholars, presidential scholars at George Washington University. I watched debates. I read their books. I watched them make speeches. And I can tell you their styles just leaped off the page and off the screen. And as I went through, I started to notice a pattern. And here's where it gets really interesting. Here's the big reveal as we start leading into this notion of presidential elections are one big personality contest. I was back in 2016, and I was watching the election, and I saw Donald Trump, who's obviously a dove, right? But Donald Trump is an eagle. He's always been an eagle. It's not about politics here. He's an eagle. And he's going against Hillary Clinton, who is a self-described policy wonk. She loves policy. You can probably guess that's an owl. And I was watching them in debates, and I thought to myself, I wonder if this big, outsized personality of Donald Trump would beat the more reserved style of Hillary Clinton. And then I started to think, well, the parrot also has this big personality, and the doves are more reserved. I wonder if eagles and parrots beat doves and owls. So I started working it back in time. And I said, well, that's pretty fascinating. It holds true in the 2000s. Eagles and parrots, every time they go against a dove or an owl, the eagle or parrot wins. I worked my way back in time, the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, and I'm like, okay, what is going on here? The 50s, the 40s, the 30s. I make it all the way back to 1932, 22 elections in a row, 88 years. Every time an eagle or parrot goes against a dove or an owl, the eagle or parrot wins. Big energy of the eagle and parrot beats that more reserved energy of the dove or an owl on a big stage. And there's no bigger stage than a presidential election. The only time doves or owls win is if they are going against other doves or owls. And I'll give you an example. Let's take somebody like Jimmy Carter. Okay, he's a dove. But he was going against Gerald Ford, another dove. A dove was winning that election. But then here comes Ronald Reagan with that parrot smile and humor, and it is lights out for the dove. George H.W. Bush, he's an owl. He won. He was going against Mike Dukakis, another owl. Okay, an owl was winning that election. Now, all of a sudden, here we've got Bill Clinton. He's playing Heartbreak Hotel on the Arsenio Hall show on his saxophone with his Wayfarer sunglasses, and it is just game over for the Owls. And this happened over and over again. Eagles and parrots win. And I started to think, well, this is interesting. We're working our way back in time. Is there something environmental? Is something causing this? It didn't matter whether we were at war or at peace. It didn't matter whether there were two new presidents or candidates or one of them was an incumbent. It didn't matter whether they came from military or business or government. It didn't matter. Eagles and parrots beat doves and owls every single time. So now we get up to 1932, and that's kind of an interesting time because all right, hey, we had a good run there, 22 elections in a row, 88 years, well, I'll take it. But then something happened at that point. At that point, I was wondering, I wonder why is it prior to that point this doesn't work anymore? Well, something happened in 1932, because 1932, in a single word, media. It was the first time we get to hear FDR and his big booming voice saying the only thing to fear is fear itself. We get to hear the power and confidence of an eagle. We get to see the charisma of the parrot, especially in the 1950s. We saw it with Kennedy versus Nixon. All of a sudden, we got to see Kennedy. Nixon as an owl wasn't winning that election. And you see what happens here is that parrot and eagle energy wins. You see, prior to 1932, where did Americans learn about presidential candidates? In the written media. And you know who sounds very wise and thoughtful in written media? Owls. And you know who sounds very caring and compassionate and they talk about values and the soul of our nation? Doves. And that shines through. You know what doesn't shine through in a newspaper article? Charisma. There is no emotional resonance of feeling the charisma of a candidate in an article written by a reporter. You can't feel their confidence. And here's what's happening. All of a sudden, we get to 1932. It's an interesting time because now, all right, the model doesn't work anymore, but does it? And here is where the plot thickens. Because at that moment, in those early years, we hit 1932. Prior to that point, owls and doves won, and they won all the time, and they kept beating eagles and parrots. Hoover won in 1928. He was an owl. He was going against Al Smith. By the way, Al Smith, see if you can figure out his style from his nickname, the Happy Warrior. He was a parrot eagle, and Hoover won, beat a parrot eagle, but all of a sudden here comes media, and now from 1932 on, eagles and parrots win. Think about how the US was started. You might think, if I said to you, all right, what style do you think most presidents are? Well, you might think, oh, I bet it's eagle. Actually, the first 6 presidents of the United States were all owls. George Washington was an owl with a secondary eagle. John Adams was an owl with a secondary dove. Jefferson was an owl with a secondary parrot. And then there were 3 more. The 5 presidents leading up to the Civil War, including Abraham Lincoln, were all doves. In the first 104 years of the United States, there was only 1 eagle, Andrew Jackson. That was it. There was only 1 parrot, Martin Van Buren. In those early years, eagles and parrots did not win, but they win today. And look at what's happening today. We don't just learn about them through visual media, we learn about them in social media. And you know what really doesn't shine through in social media? Plans. Plans don't excite people, and you can't capture plans in a tweet. And if Martin, you picture this, all right? You're on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, all right? And all of a sudden, we hear this beautiful, I have a dream speech. But if Martin Luther King Jr. had said, I have a plan, we probably wouldn't remember that. It's dreams and hope, which is where eagles and parrots shine. And in those early years, it was still one big personality contest. And today, it is even more of a big personality contest. Americans have a personality bias. We are voting for the big energy of these candidates. But think about that. Why is this a problem? I mean, all right, so what? So we're voting for eagles and parrots now. I mean, does it matter? Well, look at what's changed. If we go back to 1789 to 1928, that's that inflection point where all of a sudden now it flips. Look what happened. 1928, up to that point, only 21% of the candidates who became president were eagles or parrots. Prior to that point, look at that, 79% doves and owls. Now, all of a sudden, we move today, from 1932 on, 69% are eagles and parrots, and just 31% are doves and owls. We may be screening out great candidates. And every year, or every few years, I should say that, every few years, C-SPAN does a study, and they ask historians and presidential scholars to rank order the greatest presidents from number 1 down to the absolute worst president. Every time they take this study, every time they run this assessment, Abraham Lincoln is number 1, dove. George Washington is number 2. If we add in another person from Mount Rushmore, Jefferson, we would be eliminating 3 candidates who very likely wouldn't win today. Look in Washington. If you ever walk along the mall, you get to see the Washington Monument. You see the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial. Those are memorials to owls and doves who were great presidents that we may screen out today because they don't have a, quote, big personality. So, what do we do with this information? So what? Well, we may be eliminating good candidates, but you have a vote, and your vote matters, and you have influence over who we elect. So the next time you are watching a presidential election, tune into the styles of the candidates. And here's the big red flag for you. If you watch a debate and you find yourself saying something like, I really like her, or I don't really like him, you know what you're tuning into? Personality. And what you need to tune into is who reflects the values that you have. Who do you think will enact the policies that reflect what you would want a president to do? So I'm going to challenge you the next time you are watching a debate or you're watching a presidential election process, tune into the whole candidate, not just who they are, but what they say they will do. Because anyone of any style can be a great president. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Personality in no way determines how successful someone will be as a president. It only determines how they will go about being a president. Thank you.